Every time I say something out loud, I'm saying something genuine in the interest of having a good conversation. I'm not being prescriptive at all. I hope people listen and they go, actually, like, he's an idiot. I'm like, yes, you're right. You're right, because I am not thinking.
No.
So I'm learning how to sew, and I guess, yeah, I've been working on it for a while. And to me, it's like just something I really want to get good at. In the same way of, like, you're swimming and then you say, okay, gosh, like, I didn't really quite make it in that interval. I got to go faster next time. It's like sewing. It's like, oh, okay, like, it's a little crooked. I'm proud of these pants. I worked really hard to make them, but, like, wouldn't it be nicer for it to be better? And, like, especially like with those straight lines with contrast stitching, that's like not like quantifiable, but like obvious. You're like, I was like this a month ago. Now I'm like this. Next month I'm going to be like that. And, like, you really get that satisfaction from it.
Which is really cool, because I feel like a lot of the times when people are learning how to sew, they're just measuring themselves by, like, that moment.
Yeah.
And, like, they're like, well, it's not that great. And then they shoot themselves down already.
Yes.
As opposed to, like, basically be like, next time I'm going to do way better.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that's, like, such a beautiful, like, way of, like, just growing generally as, like, a person, of, like, having, like, those things where it's like, next time I want to do better, as opposed to, like, just really shutting yourself down.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly like when I, both in sewing and then even like making the videos and stuff, whenever I put stuff online, I always want to, like, cultivate at least an atmosphere of, like, please start. I would rather you do something and be bad than not.
Yeah.
Then, of course, in my own work and I know in my head, I'm like, no, that sucks. Like, I can't put that out there. But then I'm like, I think about, like, okay, well, like, what would I rather other people do? I have a friend who's playing a show on, he's a really, really talented jazz pianist who's venturing outside of jazz. And I want you to meet him one day, actually.
Yeah.
We were shopping here actually last Tuesday.
You were at the record store.
I was at the record store because I was looking for this. I was looking for, like, a bag because there's, like, a surplus store in North Park. And I was like, man, you should meet my friend Claudia. She's great. So we drove down here. It was closed. Oh, all right. We still passed the time okay. But the point is, he was like, boy, I don't know what I should play. I could either go, like, in this pocket of, like, classic jazz standards. I could maybe, he was recently in Brazil, on tour in Brazil. He was like, man, I could bring in, like, a little samba, like, get some stuff going, or, like, original compositions. And he was so, like, I'm not, like, so stuck in his head. He's a smart guy and he's good at what he does. But he was like, man, I really don't know what to do. I was like, Danny, I would just rather you do something than think about doing something. That's the most important thing, is, like, whatever you do, I think it will be successful. And I gave him a bunch of reasons why, but it's very much like, especially with a craft or, like, a physical thing, like, you can talk yourself out of it all you want, but, like, please just do it. Please just start, and then it'll be okay.
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of people get into that space, right? Of, like, they're in this transitional space of, like, I don't know where to do or where to go or what to, and I'm like, you're in such a beautiful space that most people don't ever get to be in. Or, like, if they do, they're so scared of that fear, right? Of, like, where to go, how to do it, and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, I'm like, embrace all of it. Do all the things that you like. Like, genuinely the things that you like and what you like playing or what you like doing or what you like as, like, a creative process or whatever. Mainly because then you'll start to create, like, what your style should be, right? And then you're like, well, maybe it's a new fusion of what he will create. And so it's like, it's just kind of like being grateful for that space of, like, discomfort where you're like, oh shit, I don't even know what to, because that could also be very overwhelming, right? Where you're like, all of a sudden now you're like, oh my God, now you're so overwhelmed that you're like, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to start. And that's that I feel like is really heartbreaking. To, like, be so overwhelmed you just don't want to start.
Well, it's like, what I mostly do online is, like, techniques, right? It's like, oh, here's how to do this. And sort of with that idea of, oh, it has to be perfect. It's also, I very much don't want to encourage or necessarily make people think, like, there is dogma of, like, there's a right way to do this. If you're folding in your hems this way, you're folding your hems, like, there's one right and one wrong way. There's a way that, like, I like to show because I use, but I also think that, like, really genuinely, if you're doing something that works, then it is right. And if you also make the effort to try other ways and you've landed at a way that maybe is, like, outside of traditional canon of what a school will teach you, it is still valid. And the only reason you would not have that perspective is if you're working in a factory, trying to make things in a most optimal, efficient way.
Yes.
And in that case, you shouldn't be watching my videos.
Exactly.
You're going to get fired if you're watching my videos. So like, then it doesn't even matter. So if you're sewing at home, there aren't really stakes to it. Obviously, like, it's a thing you're investing time into, you're investing energy. This is like a way maybe for you to express yourself, maybe just to make clothes you like to wear, whatever. Yeah. But like, nothing bad really happens if it's bad.
Exactly. So, like, people just judge you behind your back.
Yeah.
But then that's it.
But listen, like, they're gonna do that anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we could be okay with it, you know. How long have you been sewing?
I started, well, actually my first ever sewing project ever was 2018. That was hand sewing. I didn't start machine sewing until a couple years later. But the very first thing that got me into it is there's an artist I really like named Stephen Harrington, who like in high school I was like, well, this is the best stuff ever. Sort of like pop art, Keith Haring-ish, like he's self-described as like California psychedelic pop art. Just like fun characters and stuff that like, I was like 18 at the time. I was like, man, this is crazy. And he had like a collaboration with, I think it was like Barney's New York or something. I don't even know if Barney's is still around in business. But it was a cool hoodie. Oh, shoot, okay, $250 for a hoodie, I guess. So, you know, I got like a Jildan hoodie and I got like some tracing paper and I printed out the picture. I zoomed in onto like the picture of the website. I like did that and then got some thread from Michael's. And I was actually, because, you know, I looked up, okay, the backstitch. It's a line design, so, you know, backstitch around it. And it was my first ever sewing project. And I was so worried, like, I'm working so hard on this. I'm putting all this, like, I don't want it to come undone. So I tied like 5 knots for every string of thread because I was like, I don't want this to come undone. And then the worst part is on top of that, I was like, man, this is too much work to lose because I didn't know how to knot work, right? I didn't understand that, like, oh, actually they keep ships in the harbor with knots against the tides. Like, I think a knot will do okay. Yeah. But so I got some super glue and I like squirted super glue all over the threads from the back. And it's basically unwearable because the super glue, I don't know if you've used it on clothes, but like it's brittle and it's disgusting and it's scratchy and stuff. So then like the graphic on the center was just like just digs against your shirt or your skin. So unfortunately that's not really a hoodie I wear, but that was like the first thing.
That is awesome. That's so cool.
Well, that was also like at a period in my life, because I guess that would have been the summer after freshman year of college, where I kind of first was thinking about like doing something artistic-ish, because I guess like, you know, the backing up for a full biography or whatever, you know, left school, high school in 2017, went to University of Toronto for 2 years.
Oh, super cool.
Well, yeah,
Are you originally from San Diego?
I am, yeah. Nice. No, longer story. I ended up like looking at Toronto and actually McGill Canadian schools because I used to do flat water sprint canoeing. Not like a real sport. Like nobody in the United States does it.
That's freaking cool.
I mean, it was cool at the time. What I've realized since then is that I got really good opportunities and experiences out of it. But like day in, day out practice kind of sucked. So eventually, you know, I stopped doing it. But they have certainly better programs. And well, at the time, now actually we're okay in the United States, but they have good programs there. I was like, if I want to keep doing this, maybe I'll look at Canada. It's nearby. I can still do it. I stopped canoeing over the course of senior year, but I still had that on my radar. But I chose to like study psych and linguistics and stuff because I was like, this is so interesting. Wow. And I was sitting in class like, holy cow, it's cool that I know that. And then the more time went on, I was like, I don't want to use this. I'm not going to do anything research. I'm not going to do anything clinical. Like, what is this about? So that was sort of when I was having that realization of like, being in school to learn things is excellent. And I do think like getting an education is super important, both in terms of like learning things and also becoming a critical thinker, able of interacting with the world. But I was also like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So then I did that first taste of embroidery. I didn't really touch it for like until COVID. After that, it was just sort of like it planted that seed of like making things with your hands is actually really nice. So, you know, then COVID, got a machine, ran it into the ground. And then fall of 2021, because I ended up transferring to with a new school. I have a degree in culture and media, which is nonsense. I mean, it's cool. I got to take really cool classes out of it. I got to sit in like, you know, radio production classes, and I got to sit in classes of like Foucault and power and the digital panopticon. And like, there's like, like how cool is this? But then it was also like, if you go to school for computer science or nursing. They're teaching you how to be a thing.
Yes.
They're preparing you for the workforce.
Yes.
This culture media degree is like, hey, you're going to have a bunch of classes. Whatever your professors feel like teaching, that's what you'll learn. So it's certainly like you get a breadth of ideas, but also like it will leave you entirely unprepared for the workforce. So, which is why I've ended up selling in a garage, because I'm like, I guess I could do that, you know? But where was I?
Do you think that that's where they intersected, like video and sewing?
That's a good question. I had sort of I'd enjoyed making video before I went to school for that. I kind of started senior year. I was in band, and so like my band director had asked me, like, well, not asked me, asked people to make a video for like their sections and stuff. Not really important, but then I was like, oh, okay, like made a little video, and I was like, this is kind of fun. So I made some videos of me drumming over the course of senior year, because I used to drum back then. Summer after senior year, and that's actually a crazy story, lore drop on the podcast, watch this.
Yeah.
Where the name Toofbush comes from is summer after senior year of high school. I had gotten really into this Scottish sketch comedy television program called Limmy's Show. I thought it was the funniest thing ever at the time. Now I'll look back and I'll watch it and I'll be like, okay, like I guess. But like to me, it was just like a kind of humor that I hadn't really seen before. And I felt like it really spoke to my current sense of humor. So I was like, yes, this is good actually. And so that pushed me. Well, then I had the brilliant idea. I gathered up some of my friends. I was like, we're going to make our own sketch comedy videos. So we did. And actually, I think some still to this day are pretty funny.
I love it.
Well, yeah, because it was super, like, it was just one of those things where, like, of course, we graduated high school. We're going to college. You know, I was working over the summer, but I was working part-time. So it was like my mornings, I was a lifeguard. And then I just come up like, okay, what are we doing tomorrow? We'd film our stupid video. Okay, I got more ideas. But my friend Tonya at the time, we had one video about brushing teeth, where the entire video, like it's over the shoulder. I go up to the mirror, go up, start brushing the teeth, and then like wait a couple seconds, and a different hand comes in with another toothbrush and starts brushing. And so by the end of the video, it's like a 40-second long video. I got like 8 toothbrushes in my mouth. We're like, this is so funny, which I guess it kind of is, but like, that was like 17-year-old humor. And my friend Tonya, we were talking about the video, and she goes, Toofbush. We're saying words, right? It's toothbrush.
Yeah.
And we were like, that's so genius. And we named the channel that. And so then like, a couple years later, because I had a brief foray into YouTube making shoe customization videos in like 2020, like not good. Like,
what do you mean?
I mean, like drawing on Air Force Ones with Sharpies.
Oh, that's
right?
Cool.
You're like, oh, which is like, it's, I do want to say it's cool because like, but it was also like, I was like 19 and then 20, and I had never really drawn before.
It's
like
okay.
Legitimately. So I was doing it, and I was like, yeah. And now I'm looking back on it, I was like, I was really putting myself out there, and that's kind of cool because I actually wasn't even considering like what things would be like if people saw my videos, because nobody was watching them.
Yeah.
Which is nice in a way, because I really, really got that room to experiment and be like, yeah, I'm making stuff, and like it was just sort of like a bubble for me to have. Like,
how does it make you feel now? Then like.
What?
There's a lot of people that watch it.
Yeah, I think the thing is now I have maybe a little bit of a different attitude and also a lot more experience towards doing it. That like if people who watch my videos now saw one of those videos, I would be a little embarrassed just because I've grown up 5 or 6 years since then. It's not so much a matter of like, oh man, I was making art that was bad then, and I'm making art that's good now. Yes. No, it's just a matter of like, that really doesn't reflect who I am and like the things I would make now. If I were to try to do the exact same thing, I would end up with a different finished product.
Yes.
Not even from a technical side, just in terms of where my tastes are at.
For sure.
So yeah, it's like how do I feel about it now? I would say I feel kind of grateful I had that opportunity to play around, but like internally grateful, externally embarrassed. If people were like, oh, that's cool. Like you started there, whatever.
When was your first like video that you made that you were like, oh shit, there might be something here? That's a good question. I had, because I did the YouTube briefly in like 2020, didn't really touch it. And then I guess to finish up the school, I took a class as an elective in 2021. Cut, sew, and make, and that was like basics of sewing because I'd messed around on a machine before. But this was like, here's how to thread a machine, here's sort of like how to sew 3 kinds of seams. And the main thing this class taught me
that I'm grateful for the class. This is something that anybody can learn anywhere, but like I needed that external figure of authority telling me this, was that clothes are just pieces of fabric.
Yes.
Like they are. We know this.
Yeah.
But it was really, I was like, oh, you're telling me like those pants was just a shape like this and a shape like that. And then you put them together and then you put them together. And like logically, like it makes sense. But it was also like it really demystified it and made it less scary.
Yes.
So I'm grateful I had that class, absolutely. But to your video question, senior year, which I was in and out of a couple different schools. So senior was like my 6th year of college. But I was looking at jobs because I was like, well, I'm going to graduate. I should probably enter the workforce and do something productive. I couldn't find anything I wanted to do. And there were certainly things of like, oh, I could, I guess, because I had taken even some like video and film classes at school. I was like, I guess maybe video stuff, I guess this and that. But I had been sewing at school. I took advantage of the facilities. I took a couple other electives there. I took one other sewing class and a shoe construction class, which was super cool. But I was just really at a point where like, I want to make things with my hands. Yeah. And so second semester of that senior year, which would have been January of 2023, I first started posting on TikTok because I was like, okay, if like I'm going to be an artist in this modern day, I need to be able to put myself out there. And again, like I look back at the videos I made then and I was like, oh, I wouldn't make a video like that now. But it's also like, I only know that because I did make a video like that then.
Yes.
If I hadn't done that video then, I wouldn't have the taste I have now. It was necessary.
Yes.
So yeah, I did some of those, and I don't think there was ever really a moment on then where I was like, wait a second, now it's it. But I just kind of had that like thought in my brain of like, well, I'm just going to do this and then it's going to work out. So did that, came back to San Diego after graduating in like May. And then I started posting on Instagram in June. That was actually because someone had taken a couple of TikTok videos and like put them on Instagram without crediting me. And that made me so mad. So I was like, if anybody, whatever. So that, I think, you asked about a specific moment or video. I don't know if there was ever really one, but I think I always was kind of like bitten with that bug of like, I'll try to make this work.
Yeah. And I love it.
Well, it's, I'm still trying to figure out how to make it work, but like, I guess I can at least hit the record button and talk now.
Yes. So I know that you had mentioned, which I thought was like such an interesting thing that you said, that if you wanted to enter the world of like this art in like this modern age, that you really wanted to put yourself out there on like social media. Do you think it's like really important?
See, that's such a loaded question because my only real experience has been navigating art through social media. Yeah. And I know at the same time, there are incredibly talented people who I'll see someone's work and I'm like, you are just absolutely ridiculous. And maybe they have like, 3,000 followers who have come across them organically, which is enough because they have connections and opportunities and they are good enough at their craft and they have dedicated themselves that they have people who've seen them. And they're, those people go to the other people, they're in the right rooms, they make it work.
Yes.
So I certainly don't want to imply that like, well, yeah, it's thank goodness I'm posting videos on social media or else I wouldn't be able to make any art. No, there are ways to make it work. For me, that is sort of the route I went through. Also because, and this is actually, I feel like a big sort of theme and thing I carry with me, I feel as though I got an audience too early. In that I ended up making like content talking about like how to do things as I was learning them. I was like, oh,
that's
a
perfect
cool.
time.
It's a perfect time, and maybe like it makes it approachable, but at the same time, like from there, I think, and I don't know if this is correct, of course, I've not talked to every person ever.
Yeah.
But I think people started perceiving that I was better at sewing than I was, because at the time I wasn't really good, but I was just starting, and I was like, oh, how cool is this? And so then that haunted me with like this deep insecurity of like, these people think I'm at a certain level, I must get to that level. I can't really slack off and be like, oh yeah, I'm sewing stuff. Like I'm always chasing after what I think I should be and what I think other people expect of me, which certainly like...
That's kind of dangerous.
It is dangerous and it can be draining and it can certainly be something that if left unchecked, can burn you out.
Yes.
And make you lose interest and passion entirely.
Exactly.
but it's also like, it's rewarding to work hard at something and get better at it. So if you're able to sort of see like, this is what I want from it, I have maybe expectations, or maybe the perceived weight of expectations.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not even there.
Yeah.
But being aware with like what's coming from where, why you're actually doing it. So because I think it also really does come from a place of like, I genuinely care about it and I want to do things right, because now I'm like, I think it's a worthy pursuit, you know?
Yes.
Why the heck not work hard at something that you believe in? But no, that's even why like I don't really sell stuff I make, is because every single thing I'm like, I can see things wrong with it. And if people think, oh my God,
you're so crazy.
I really believe that.
You're so crazy. Like seriously, because it's like, I feel like, you know, when I had came across like your videos and stuff like that, and I was like, oh my God. And so this is why I think that it's like so important, right? Where you're just kind of like, that as you're learning it, to teach it. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because you're so happy to have learned it.
That is true.
And then you're like, oh my God. And you have to explain every detail of it, because once you know it, you kind of almost get jaded and you're like, I'm expecting you to know that this had to be folded at this. And then you're just kind of like, and so you almost skip steps because you've already done it like a million times, right? But when you're just learning it, you're like, oh my God, I learned it this way and it saved my life so many times because of this, you know? And so you're so like, there is that like passion behind it. And so I feel like for me, like showing so vast, like I genuinely feel like I'm like sometimes like that huge imposter syndrome of like, everyone's gonna find out I'm a fake. You know, which is like, if you start to think about it, you're like, how are you like a fake, you know?
Right, because you clearly like, you know, for those of you tuning in to the audio podcast and you can't see the video, we're in Claudia's shop right now and it is covered in beautiful works of art. So like,
but
I think you got it going
hard,
on.
you know, it is hard because it's like those expectations, right? And I feel like I'm right there with you. I totally agree with like, yes, working hard for something is so important, right? Where it's like, you're like, hey, I want to see this grow. And I feel like, you know, watching it grow, like where it's like, obviously kids is like one thing, having a business and growing it is like another thing. And watching it, you're like, wow, this is like great. And I feel like it's so rewarding for that, right? But I also feel like there are these little toxic things that like get like kind of like shoved in between all those things. And it is the expectation of others that like we kind of like will take in, you know? But it's also, you know, you almost have to like shove it to the side and just basically be like, yes, that does exist. And yes, I do care about that part too. But it's also like, you know, I feel like what really overrides it is like, yes, wanting to create a good thing. Yeah. You know, and I feel like, you know, that was like another one of my questions where it's like, have you ever thought about selling it? And that's where I just kind of was like, you're fucking nuts. Like, I've seen your work. You're obviously wearing a jacket that you've made. And so it's like, for me, I'm just kind of like, you know, it's kind of like going back to that thing where it's like, start and don't get overwhelmed to like, and you're getting overwhelmed and not wanting to like sell it, you know? But I also feel like a lot of people they've asked me, they're like, have you ever just wanted to keep a piece? And I'm like, not really. But mainly because I feel like I was like raised to like kind of mass produce and then just kind of like, I knew that there was a purpose for it to go somewhere. And I feel like sometimes as an artist and like as an artist in San Diego, then you're like, well, you want to create pieces of art that someone could enjoy, you know, and that it will go to its new home and hopefully you get compensated for it. You know, and like then you're like, yeah, I'm living off my art. Because I feel like, you know, really people investing in like local art and artists and wearable art and things like that, it's so important, and especially like in places like San Diego where it's like it's just hard enough to make a living. You know, so it's like when you are supporting the artists, and it does create like a more richer kind of environment for everyone.
Well, I feel as though you very much embody very well the spirit of being an artist with roots here, and you're doing things in your community actively. We're seeing these shirts on the racks that you got in your future projects. I don't know if they're under wraps, so I'm not going to say them out loud.
No, you could say
okay, no, you're rocking with like San Diego Football Club and like museums in Balboa Park. Like that is quintessentially San Diego. That is something that I respect and admire about you. And I look at you and I wonder like, how, I guess, can I get there? Because you are obviously much further along in this journey than I am.
Yeah.
And, the thing.
And I would almost think the opposite. And so here's so my daughter, she's like at a very at that age, right? She's about to be 13 and she's like TikTok and like Instagram and, all this stuff. And I always remind her, I'm like, hey, you just got to remember that these people that you might idolize, they're probably not this it's just a very small time frame, of their life, and they probably also get sad and moody and all those kind of things, and so I'm like, not everything's real, so just remember that kind of stuff and don't try to compare yourself to others on there and stuff. And so for me, I feel like, we've had the experience of people seeing us on Instagram and then basically being like, Instagram and visibility equals success. And so I feel like I always really try to get out of my head in terms of that, because I'm like, success to me, it's so far, I'm like, I still have so much to do, to get there. And especially if you're measuring yourself by how much money you make off of it, then you're just kind of like, whoa, people have this really screwed up idea of a successful person. But then again, it's obviously being toxic in the way, having this toxic thought of really valuing myself according to how much money I make is really also really sad.
It is. And certainly every time I say something out loud, I'm saying something genuine in the interest of having a good conversation. I'm not being prescriptive at all. I hope people listen and they go, actually, he's an idiot. I'm like, yes, you're right. You're right, because I am not thinking.
No, but I feel like, a lot of us kind of get into that space, right? Where you're just kind of like, oh shit, how do you, because it's because we are idolizing a lot of people on there, and then you're whoa. And I am right there where I'm like, whoa, how did you grow? Because I'm sure a lot of people are always curious and wondering, how did you grow that audience? And how does someone genuinely grow that audience? And they're seeing you as that success. And there is a success behind that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I first, before I respond to that question, just do want to reiterate, comparison is certainly no help to anybody. But I don't want to let it pass to I love what you do.
I like what you do.
I appreciate it. We could both do that at the same time. That's fantastic. But it's really it makes me happy to see that you have these workshops and you have people learn how to sew in your space.
Yeah.
That I think is obviously there's a lot of things that it's all about, because you're doing a lot of things and you're a multifaceted individual who works with your family, who's a bunch of other great people. But I really like the things you do.
But you know what? For me, really having this podcast was really about wanting to have an excuse to connect with people, first of all, right? Because you're how do you, I feel as you get older and you're an adult, you're how do you meet people, and how do you meet them where you're hey, this is cool, you're doing cool stuff, we always opening up our studio. We're always dude, we have a studio, it's very we move things around all the time.
Yeah.
And you're always welcome to use the studio to teach anything that you want to teach. And I feel people would really love that. And we're always I really feel I just talk to so many people where I'm ooh, how do I plug this person to talk to this person? Because it's everyone's so already connected. It's just meeting that person, right?
Yeah, making a community out of individuals.
Yeah. And obviously sewing has been one of those things where it's it almost was devalued, and now people are bringing it back, and and you're yes, I'm so glad that there's more of that youthful spirit, right? Where it's hey, we're younger people that don't want to make pillows, at Joann's or whatever. And so it's cool to basically see it in those kind of ways of this is how you get ultimately really creative, and especially men in textile art. Because I feel for a long time there was that kind of gender thing, right? Which I never really saw that, because my dad sewed.
Yeah.
And he was very much like a man's man. And so I was huh, so I never saw that as a gender thing. And so it's really nice to also have that representation in a male perspective too.
Well, I guess first I'll respond to that, and then I'll get back to the question you asked earlier, which is that Alex, who you've met, Alexander, he is a couple years older than I am, but in addition to that, he also started sewing before I did. Because again, like I started sewing like, you know, really 2020, got the first machine, but I wasn't really consuming online content. I didn't really see other people in the same space. So of course I didn't really develop like, oh, this is how it should be, because I had no normative assumptions as to the field. But with that, you know, he's mentioned when he started sewing, like, you know, maybe freshman, sophomore year of high school, maybe that would have been what, like 2011 for him? I don't know. But he was saying, you know, at that time, like, yeah, he was a boy sewing. People were like, oh, what the heck? You're a boy sewing. Get out of here. I don't really see like the fact of like, oh, like I'm a male sewing as trailblazing, because like since the minute I've started being on like social media, watching sewing content, like there have been guys doing it. And it certainly hasn't always been the case, but like other people already knocked that down. I just get to walk and enjoy what they've done. I don't feel like I'm fighting any kind of assumptions or biases because like, you know, I'm coming into the game late. People have already done that work for me. So, but yeah, I mean, like it is, I think, is certainly like representation is important for anybody, no matter who you are. So if you're a guy, then like, I'm glad I can represent to the male population, but more importantly, like I just want to be accessible and interesting to everybody who watches.
Yeah, for sure.
To your earlier question about like how to grow an audience, that, you know, that's a large response to that. I think the best way I can phrase it, and this is actually the way that I've chosen to go about it, it is, of course, as I mentioned with sewing techniques, not the dogma. And there may be other ways that if you are a different person, could be far more interesting to you and far more helpful to you. But the thing that I sort of have is perhaps I'll get the question of, oh man, how can I get people to watch my videos? And from my perspective, if you are asking that question, you have lost. You're starting from the wrong place. Because what I really think about is how can I make videos that people want to watch? It's not so much like tricking people into consuming the things you want to make, which please, if it's your social media, make the things you want to do. That's the most important thing. But I want people who watch my videos to feel as though they've gotten something out of it, rather than maybe being sold to, of course, rather than maybe it being a ploy for them to then go, oh, okay, and he makes clothes, I want them to buy my clothes. I just want it to come from a place of like, I'm not wasting your time. Because when I'm on social media, I study videos. If I'm like, what works about this? I'll look at sewing videos and be like, that's inspiration, or I like this. And other than that, I genuinely feel like it is kind of a waste of time. That is the perspective I've come to. I don't post on my personal account anymore. I just text my friends. Well, actually, I'm really bad at doing that. I try to. But yeah, so my main thing is like, when I make a video, I don't want to waste your time. And that I think is maybe like one of the things that's helped me grow an audience more than anything, is that like, obviously, like I'm getting in front of a camera and I'm talking, and I like it when I get big numbers, but like somewhat setting aside like that individual, like, oh, like I have this big page, because really, honestly, this is a separate discussion in and of itself, but I don't feel, I have to phrase this correctly, because I'm genuinely very, very grateful for all the support I get and have gotten. And there are people and usernames and kind comments that like every day I'm like, that is really wonderful. And like, really sweet. That it is sweet. It really is, because like it is easier than not to either say nothing or like say something critical. But someone who actually like takes the time to be like, maybe they'll be like, oh, cool thing. Or maybe they'll be like, this is a cool thing because this and this. Like, yeah, I guess from a logical perspective, it's like, oh, sure, whatever. Like they wrote a couple words. No, really, people don't engage with the world in that way. So the fact there are people who are willing to go out of their way to be kind, I appreciate that in a way that I can't really articulate on this podcast. It is more than just like, it really makes you feel a certain way. But also with that, like, I don't feel, I'll just use the word famous, in that it's not about me. It's about the thing that I put in front of the camera and the things I'm sharing. But I honestly think like if my home address got leaked tomorrow, I wouldn't worry about it, because I don't think anybody would knock on my door. Really, it's like, you know, I think I am a way to deliver information to people, and people are perhaps grateful for that. And I have been able to connect with people in a way that is genuinely meaningful over the platform. But it's not so much of like, oh, I'm getting a lot of followers, so I'm going to be a big deal.
Yes.
I'm getting a lot of followers, so more people are watching my videos.
Yeah.
And that's really all it is at the end of the day.
That's really cool. I'm glad that like because you do have like a really, really big audience. And so I feel like there are a lot of people that have that big of an audience and they're not as nice as you.
Well, I mean, I feel like
or
the
like
thing
there's
is,
a persona, you know, or
but like the distinction I have is, and I think this doesn't cut up everybody in one or two ways, but like an influencer is the product. A content creator, if I fall in that category, creates a product. And there's some people who want to post to become the product in a sense of like, they turn their camera on and sort of whatever they do. Maybe it's like, and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular. I'm just like giving this as a hypothetical example. Maybe some days it's like, oh, we're going to sew this. And maybe some days it's like, we're going to get ready for brunch with friends and this is my outfit. And maybe some days it's like, oh, okay, I repaired this squeaky table in the kitchen. And it's like, they turn the camera on, but they are what is happening in the video and everything they do is secondary.
Yes.
And I think and there's some people who want that and there's some people who get great success from that. The route I have chosen to take is like, hey, I'm turning the camera on, but it's only because I have something that I think is worth saying and perhaps you can listen to. And if not, like it doesn't go up. I got scripts written, I got things filmed that I'm like, I'm proud of it. I think it was great. And also like, I don't know if this is the right place for it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go up.
I love that. That's really cool. So I know that there's like an intersection between like film and sewing, which is like really, really cool. And you had a film teacher once.
I did.
Yeah.
Is this, you've read my website?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was big shout out to Nathan Fitch.
Yeah.
Because I remember first semester I was at the new school was fall of 2020. I had gone to University of Toronto. I had gone to Miramar Community College, and then I transferred to the new school, all online, all COVID. And this was my first experience taking an arts class because I was like studying my butt off in Toronto. I was taking like cell molecular biology freshman year, which really I had no idea what was going on.
It's wild.
But yeah, I mean, I'm actually, it's a total sidetrack, but I'm glad I did that. But so this was my first ever experience in an arts class. I was coming in as a transfer student when probably everybody else had gotten that beforehand and also had been on campus beforehand. So they were like, COVID, this sucks. It's online film school. What are we going to learn? I was showing up to class like, this is the coolest thing ever. And so because of that, I really appreciated this professor because he was really going out of his way to like set up demos in his studio of like, can you guys see this on Zoom? And like everybody had their camera off. And I was like, yeah, it's really great. It's really good. Thank you. Because I was like, this is so cool. I could be here. But yeah, so I had some classes with him. And yeah, I guess the quote is like, oh, if you have a good time while filming something, other people have a good time while watching it, which I do think holds true.
Yes.
And, filming, watching, those two verbs are interchangeable with all kinds of things. Like if you make anything with a passion, that passion will come through.
Yeah.
Maybe it's clothes, maybe it's like you bake a cookie with a lot of love, whatever it is. But as far as like the intersection of film and sewing, I actually, it's almost funny because this feels like I'm going to use the same exact words as the different conversation we were having about social media. I love filming stuff because it's almost like a little game to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, how can I do this? And then like make it interesting and like what kind of like, maybe I want like a little stop motion of a panel moving on the table bit by bit. And like, it's sort of just a fun, like it genuinely is entertaining.
That's cool.
Which I think like that's also like probably a big part of maybe success on social media is liking it.
Yes.
Right? If you have to put yourself through a slog of like, oh my God, it's video day to day, then like you probably are going to have more trouble than someone who's like, oh man, I get to film a cool video.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works. But with that, I do have fun with filming, and also at the same time, like I think it is literally the medium through which to transmit concepts and the things I make. So I've thought before of like, oh, would I want to try to get into more actual like artistic film, things like that? And I would like to, but for the things I do at the moment and like the way I use my camera and Adobe Premiere, I'm like, okay, well, like how can I film something to best either get across a certain concept, or at least if it's not like a specifically educational video, like I'll make it entertaining and engaging in some way. So I think I don't use the medium of film like for all of the art that it's capable of, but I like it. and it's
That's
something I enjoy
awesome.
doing.
That's so cool.
Well, I know that you and Manny, because Manny
Yes.
is like big on the film side of things.
Yes.
Do you at least enjoy, like, I mean, of course you do, because like you're a very joyful person. And
Yeah.
like, how do you feel about, I'm going to use the word having to make content versus being able to do things and engage in the world?
I feel like sometimes it's not as enjoyable.
That happens, yeah.
Mainly for the reason, because it's like, you know, we're like, all right, we're going to make a video. And then you're like, okay, cool. But then it's like, if you're already in work mode and you're like, and so you're already like kind of like in work mode and you're like, fuck, I have to stop. And then
you got to pick the threads out of your hair.
And you're like, okay. And so mainly those are like really rare, because it's like we try to like film it where it's like, or if it's like, you know, there's like a specific time when we go out and we're like, okay, we designate the time.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of fun to, I feel like one of the things that like Manny has always like told me is like, if you're going to have an engaged audience, what do you want to say during that time? And so for me, I'm like, okay, like, and so I always think about like who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah.
And so remembering those kind of things, and then just genuinely like having fun. Like, you know, I feel like, you know, I grew up with like my dad having like a camcorder, and like us just basically being like, we're on TV, and like just being like silly and just, you know, like that kind of stuff. And I felt like, you know, it would always be fun to like have videos with your friends, and you know, I don't know, you know, having like a camcorder and filming like with friends and stuff. And so I've always kind of like seen it as like, you know, that's Manny's like really strong side, and like, you know, we kind of like pitch each other ideas, and like we'll have like, I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do this? And he's like, yeah. And then like, you know, we just have fun with it, but also same, we're kind of like, how does this make sense for the brand, you know? And so it's like, sometimes you're like, yeah, that's a cool idea, but how does it make sense for the brand? And so then you're just kind of like, it doesn't. And so then it has to like get put somewhere else, you know? But, you know, I feel like it's important to like, I'm right there with you, where it's like creating content that is good, and that like people are going to want to watch, or that, you know, you're showing some kind of process where people feel like they're like, oh, cool, like that they're, you know, having a good time watching it. Because, you know I lose a lot of time if I go on Instagram just kind of scrolling through, and then you're like, oh, you know. And so I want to create content where people are like, they feel motivated and encouraged.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to like leaving and you're like, oh man, I feel like shit about myself. And, you know, and so I feel like a lot of people do feel like that when they get off of it. So creating more of that kind of stuff is nice, you know?
Well, I feel like you are sort of that motivational person. And to go back earlier, you were talking about how like, oh, it's nice to teach things as you learn them, because then you're not jaded, and you're not, you've been sewing for a long time. How do you keep that obvious enthusiasm and genuine appreciation for what you're doing and teaching? Because you still teach beginners every darn day.
Yes.
So what has kept through those, however, like 20, 30 years of sewing?
I think that mainly the thought of people expecting perfection with sewing. And so for me, I'm like, that's so, like, I'm always like, ugh, fuck that. And so, no, like, how do you, and going about it in like a very patient approach. And so I feel like with anyone wanting to learn something new, people usually are like, well, I tried it once and I'm not good at it. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you're not going to be good at it. And this is like a freaking skill. So you're not going to be good at it the first time. But it's like, genuinely, like, I always see it as like almost like a challenge. Like, how could you make this person fall in love with it, that they're gonna want to do it again? And so creating those like little projects that they're gonna be like, oh, I made this, and everyone's gonna like basically be like, wow, that's a cool X, Y, and Z, and then they're like, thank you, I made it. And it just keeps, you know, because it's like, I do agree with you about like that feeling of making something with your hands. I feel like we're all meant to create. So when you're done, you're like, wow, I made this. And it's almost like you're giving yourself that self-worth that like sometimes we look for in other people, where we're like, validate me. And then you're just kind of like, it's like almost like you're giving yourself your own validation that is like way stronger than like someone validating you. And so I always see it as a challenge of like, how do I make these people fall in love with this? And that's where I feel like I also am very like, yeah, I know you want to make that gown, but you're also not ready for it.
Yeah.
And so let's focus on something that will get you to get ready. Because then I do feel that it's like, if they don't enjoy it, it was because I wasn't a good teacher. And like, I take a lot of like pride in basically like people genuinely saying that I'm good at teaching them how to do it, you know, because I genuinely do want for them to basically be like, wow, I want to do it again. Or, you know, and even if they don't, that they still had a good experience with it.
Yeah.
And so that's where, you know, and it's like, I always tell them, I'm like, we have to learn the rules in order to like break them. And I'm very non-traditional like teacher. And so I feel like in some sewing worlds, like I'm very like cringe where they're like, you did what to what? And to me, I'm just like, so what? You know, so, you know, but yeah, I genuinely want people to, I really want people to continue to sew.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I like about it.
Well, I think I'm going to put that phrase in my back pocket of like, how can I make someone fall in love with this? That's a very good way of looking at it. Because it's also like a thing that I think about is, you know, back when I was doing more sports in high school and stuff, I guess, I don't know how much information I want to give here, because it's like kind of like random and unnecessary.
It's okay.
But the point is like, as far as there's a fitness YouTuber, Jeff Nipper, you know, whatever. Don't know if you've heard of it, doesn't even matter. But he had a philosophy that I really liked, that as far as like the pyramid of success, or the pyramid of like you're doing things in a way that will get your goals met, the bottom rung, actually I think it was a ladder, whatever, metaphor doesn't matter. The bottom rung is doing something enjoyable. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want to come back and do it, if there's not something else that makes you want to try it again, then it doesn't matter how good your recovery is, or how good your program is, or how well you sleep at night, or how like all these other things, because if it's not something you really have the desire to do, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And so with that, it's like when people are perhaps like, oh, you have to do it this way to be totally right, there is value 100% in teaching something in a way that like, maybe it's like the default way for a reason, right? People get there, but also at the same time, like, I think it's so important to be able to get there yourself in a way that like you have the desire to explore that space and try different things. And if you're not really coming at it with that passion of like, oh boy, like I want to do this, then, you know, it doesn't matter how good your resources are, because I genuinely think, you know, not that it's judged by like the end physical product, this and that, but like the person who loves the thing they're doing, I think has the potential to get quote unquote further in that journey than you.
And I always think back at like whistle while you work, enjoy every process of it, you know, because it's like, you know, completing any kind of like goal or anything, there's going to be like so many things that you're like, well, I don't like doing that part, but you still have to do it. And like, you know, and then it's like getting there and then you're like, okay, cool. But if you're dragging your feet the whole entire time, you're going to be like, oh God, why did I want to do, you know, and you're just complaining. It's going to make it even like worse. So yeah, I'm always like, just enjoy doing the thing, regardless of what part it is, you know, because it's like, there are a lot of parts that I'm like, I don't really like that part, but you know,
it's part of like the larger thing you enjoy. It's funny because like I think a great example of this in my own practice was like ironing, because when I started sewing, I was like, cut the fabric, sew it, what else are you gonna do, right? That's it. And
that's
of course,
my favorite part.
But everybody out there is going to tell you probably like, you gotta iron. Iron when you sew. And it's like, you know, you hear that press the seams, whatever you're opening up, like your simplicity pattern instructions, iron. How does ironing help put the fabric together? Whatever. So I went through, you know, certainly a period of time when I started sewing where I didn't iron, and only because of that do I now really iron. Because I had to see the difference between doing it one way of my own volition and then doing it a different way that was perhaps like more commonly prescribed. If I had just like read a book and been like iron, and I only ever ironed, I don't think I would take it as seriously as having really, really come to that conclusion by myself. And that's, I think, true across a lot of disciplines and a lot of things. Like, you have to kind of be wrong in order to understand what it feels like to be right. And that's like with, you know, sewing a straight line and things like that. You know, if you're successful off the bat, there's maybe a reason for that. And maybe it's because you like did all the prerequisite preparation and you like did all the work and stuff. But all that points to the same thing of like, you have to kind of understand like the ways where you can go wrong, and you maybe have to do that and walk that path, and then that makes you, I guess, tread a little more carefully and smarter down the right path.
Did you ever, at any point, think about like why a sewing instructional video as opposed to like the process of just making it and then selling it? Was there a specific reason why you wanted to?
That's a pretty good question. I think part of it is that like I had sort of started just posting like, oh, here's me making stuff, this is the process. And then people would ask questions and I'd be like, oh, well, I guess, you know, so then I'd like show them stuff. And then there's certainly like a piece of that is if someone is getting a direct value out of the thing online, they're probably going to pay more attention. So part of it is like statistics, numbers based of like, okay, if there's like, hey, here's how you can sew a welt pocket. That's probably more interesting than like, I made a jacket with a welt pocket.
Yes.
So there is, you know, partly like that side of like the fact that it is sort of me putting my things out there and trying to like serve people best rather than just being like, oh, here's a process. I think it's fun. It is really like I describe a lot of things that I do as a game of really it's like the challenge of like, here's a little concept and here's a thing and like how do I make it clear with sort of the least amount of words and sort of in an interesting way. And you know, I just
love
find
that.
I mean like because I work as a substitute teacher, a lot of the days are kind of boring because you go in and the teacher's left instructions on the desk and says, kids will do work in their Chromebooks. Okay, you know, I guess they open up their Chromebooks. Hey, you guys need anything? No. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let me know if you do. So it was funny because I had a day about maybe 2 weeks ago now that I was doing an English class for 3 periods because it's a 4-period day. And I was doing a Spanish class 4th period. And the 4th period Spanish class, because of course you never know what substitute teacher you're going to get. Yes. I was put in there to cover 1 period, so it's not like they expected me to teach Spanish. So they're like, okay, it's going to be study hall. Kids are going to work on whatever. And, you know, I'd been teaching all week. I'd been in a couple different classes. And the best part of my week was in a Spanish class talking about finding a terminal angle in a unit circle. Because that was really, it was like just the idea of, you know, it was a fresh concept. And, you know, converting your degrees into radians, like how can you make this clear? And then, Claudia, we finish and we talk about it. And he's doing the things. And he's like, okay, 8 pi over 3. And he goes, thanks, man. I was like, you're welcome. And that's really like, it's a good feeling of like, this kid, you know, he maybe was like, he knew a little bit more than when he started. And then he was like proud of himself.
Yeah.
And having known that feeling, especially in sewing, of not knowing something and then kind of working to learn it and then being proud of myself. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if someone directly taught it to you or if you figured out, because you still kind of have to do the work yourself. Yes. Yeah. You can consume as many resources you want, either in the form of like an instructional teacher in person at school, if you had that opportunity, or like a book or a fashion thing online. But like the success really does come from you choosing to do it and choosing to like, I guess, use your brain to understand and then physically doing it with sewing. And so like, I guess kind of helping other people get there, like, you know, selfishly, like it feels good. I walk away and I'm like, yeah, that's right. You know, it's a good day.
Yeah. Okay. So do you feel that Toofbush has a specific style?
As far as like physical aesthetic style of how things look?
Yes.
Or yes, and also like it changes because like the style is only ever what my style is, right? Yeah. For a while, when I was maybe embroidering stuff, this was in like 2021, 2022, 2023. I'm just naming years at this point. But I would embroidery thread over seams. Is I would go like, you know, stitch back and forth like this, and I do a bunch of different colors. And I thought it was really cool. I think it is really cool, but to me it was really nice because I don't really do graphics or designs or like iconic images, mostly because I'm like, what would they be? You know, I feel like if I were to choose like a thing in my work, it would be almost arbitrary of like, I guess I'll put this wave on here. But like to me, like the joy of sewing is like really like the process of it and like manipulating things in space. Yeah. So, you know, I don't really do those like symbols or graphic design in that sense. So I gravitate towards embroidery on seams because I get to embroider, I get to sew, you get to customize your clothes. It's easy over seams because you don't need any extra hoops or anything. That's the most structured part of the garment. So just back and forth. Now I'll wear shirts like that, because I made them a couple of years ago. They're still good shirts. And I'll wear them out of the house. People are like, oh, I like that a lot. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I don't like it anymore, but I still appreciate it. So right now, and this is where I'm sort of at in my own learning journey, is I'm interested in like making things as clean as I can. Like that's really like, I went through a period of like,
challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And it's sort of the same thing of the irony of like, I first went through a period of like, yeah, I'm trying stuff out. I'm really making it work for myself. I'm currently on a kick of like, I want to make it look like nobody else can, whatever. You mentioned you got to learn the rules to break the rules. Yeah. So right now, because I sort of went through that exploratory period of like, okay, is sewing something I enjoy? Yeah, I did my toes in all these different pools. And because of that, I've ended up at a place where I'm like, what if I see where I could take it? Yes. What if I really work hard at it? And then, maybe in a month, maybe in a year, maybe in 10 years, I'll be like, okay, I'll make silly, crazy stuff and like, it'll be goofy. But like that really like, because I do think a lot about what do I genuinely want to do. Because I think especially on social media, this is a huge tangent, but there's that pull between spectacle and, how should I put it? There's a pull between not spectacle and authenticity, because that's implying that like people who make big, interesting things aren't being authentic themselves. Yeah. But I actually haven't talked about this at all. That's crazy. It's a podcast about me and sewing, and I haven't even shared my core beliefs. Claudia, I really, the thing that appeals to me about clothing is it's useful. Yes. It's you get to work so hard at something, and then you get to wear it out of the house. Yes. And you feel pretty good. You're like, yeah, look at this. So it's, I am both willing to put more work into something that I know is going to be like useful for however many years to come, and tactile and immediate. And so because of that, like there's a point in when you're being, and the conversation I'm about to have is maybe seems implicitly laden with values, but this is really just my own perspective that is not prescriptive. This is really just what I believe for my own work. Yes. I also think anybody else is an artist and can do whatever they want. Yeah. The thing that I sort of think is I want it to be functional. Yes. Right. Like, doesn't everybody? Yeah, it's clothes. But like, there are some things that like, I have a very simple style as a person. This is pretty much like my uniform. I wear a shirt and pants like this and maybe a jacket on top. Yeah. It's not going to get crazier than this. Yeah. The jacket's going to be different, shirt's going to be different, but it's pretty much over here. Yeah. And so there's a point of like adding on details like, Issey Miyake, talented designer, a sweater with 3 sleeves. Novelty for the sake of novelty, and I'm not. He thought about fashion more than I have. He's like incredibly talented, but like novelty for the sake of novelty does great on social media. Yes, it's something people have never seen before, and it makes them stop scrolling and it makes them look at it. My challenge is to not make something that's eye-catching because it's eye-catching. It's just to make something that I think is done in a way that I want it to be done. If it looks like something that's never been made before, that's great. Most likely it's gonna look like something that's been made before. Yes. I think these pants are probably one of the things I'm most proud of at the moment. And also like, you're gonna look at them and you're not gonna stop on the street. They're only ever brown pants. Yes. I'm just more proud of them than anything else I've made. Which is so cool, because I feel like a lot of the designers, right, where it's like, I don't know if you would consider yourself a designer as like a main thing or anything like that, but I feel like a lot of designers, they do get into that space of like, wanting to like just abandon that like wheel that has already been made, and then basically be like, let's go out to like this part and like try to recreate the wheel, as opposed to like, how do you perfect that wheel? And I totally agree with you about like creating items that you could wear every single day, that are going to last a really long time, and that are going to work with the work that you're doing, right? Where it's like, for me, since I'm constantly moving around and doing all kinds of stuff, and like on ladders and sometimes on the floor, I used to make, like one summer I made a bunch of dresses, and like I was like, so cute, and like and then I was like, oh shit, I have to get on ladders now, and I have to and all those kind of things. And then I was like, well, I still like wearing dresses and things like that, but I want to also look cool while I'm on a ladder, and like not feel like I'm gonna get stuck on this ladder, or just creating things that are useful, because it's like, we have so much stuff already, right? Where it's like, okay, like creating a tote, it's useful. It's not like a pillow, right? Where it's like people are going and they're like, we're making a pillow, and like
it's not going to match any of the stuff that's in my house, but it's
Yeah.
a pillow, you know? And so, and it's like a tote. It's like, you could take it to the farmer's market. You could do this. You could create it bigger to go to the beach. You could, you know, so it's like things that are like, that are useful in your life that you're going to basically be like, I need this.
Yeah.
It's like, I totally agree with you on that stuff. And not, for me, like I always tell people, I'm like, don't try to recreate the wheel. How do you take apart like a t-shirt and then make it into like a jacket or a sweater? And once you're able to like see it like in that way, then you could really hack it into so many things.
Yeah.
You know? And then at that point, then you could add like a third sleeve. But it's really like, you know, people get so overwhelmed by like, I have to be such an original designer, you know? And it's like, yeah, but there's a shit ton of bread at the bread aisle and people still buy it.
Wow.
And so,
good metaphor.
You know,
Yeah.
And it's like, and it still gets eaten up every single day. So it's like, I feel like it genuinely is like who that person is and like wanting to support that. That's why for me, when you were like, I don't know, I couldn't sell it. Like, I know what there is in there, and, you know? And so for me, I'm like, no, I guarantee you, if you put whatever you have created on that website and you say it's going to be available this day, it'll sell quick. And it's almost like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, because I do feel that it's like, you make great things. How could you take it to that next level? And what does that next level look for you?
Well, I guess I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because it's also like, you know, maybe people who are reinventing the wheel, like they have ridden on that wheel so many times, they know it backwards and forwards. The only interesting thing left for them to do is come up with the wheel 2.0.
Exactly.
I'm just not there yet.
Yeah.
So I'm just still trying to figure out, like, you know, how to properly attach the wheel to my car. And then, you know, once I figure out how to make things that I'm like, I think this is, you know, you just said don't like perfect, but I make it perfect in the way that I'm like, I don't know what else I could have done to make it better. I'm just really completely satisfied. Then it's like, you know, I might go back and I might make a sweater with 4 sleeves. I'll be like, this is the best design ever. Because like I think most of all want to come from a place of sort of that authenticity, which is why I sort of posited authenticity is that opposite of spectacle. Instead of doing things like, what's gonna get clicks and stuff, what can I do that I'm like, I really wanted to make this.
Yes.
And, you know, my litmus test is almost like, can I wear this to work?
Exactly.
And that's the clothes I make, because that's the only place I go out of the house, really. So it's like, that's
which is
purpose.
It's really interesting. We started watching like Addictions to Social Media.
Oh, is that the name of like a documentary or something?
I think something like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And they interview all kinds of people, and they are, I guess, in their own right, content creators and you know, like I guess influencers or whatever, and they do some wild stuff every single, like the next time and then the next time and then the next time, and I'm like, whoa. And so that's kind of like for me, like I was like, oh my God, because I'm always genuinely interested in like, how do you build an audience that big, and like how do you keep them engaged, and how do you know, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm always like, even like when someone is going about it like a different way, like I'm always like, this is interesting. I still want to like figure out how they got there, and like, you know, taking some like little bits from everyone, right? And so I was like, whoa, so he's, you know, saying all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, wow, that's like a lot to try to keep up with every single time. And so it is really difficult to have authenticity when you're trying to, you know, outdo yourself in that kind of way. But yeah, I'm glad you're not trying to drink a whole pint of vodka just to get viewers.
No. You
You're
know,
like, I'm gonna sew while I'm drunk.
Honestly, Claudia, this is gotta write this down. We got to make another podcast.
Exactly.
It's the after hours.
Exactly. It's the sewing, the OnlyFans for sewing.
Yes, there you go. High stakes, high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
So I think that authenticity does really, obviously, if you're being authentic to yourself, it's going to look different from other people. So it's like, you know, when I think and like when I say that, like, you know, authentic for me means like making things that look a certain way that I can wear to this place, or a video that's like this. It's also at the same time, like, if you really like are making a crazy thing and you're like, I can't tell you what your authenticity is, you know? So I have my attitude that I approach my work, and it's sort of like there are general values that are goalposts along the path which I walk.
Yeah.
And also like, that's not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is good to have like those kind of like, you know, little like areas to like hit on, right? And like just remembering that it doesn't look like that for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that really becomes one of those things, especially like now in this time frame, right? Where it's like, what is a business, especially like a sewing business, like what does it look like? And like who makes up a definition of what a successful one looks like?
Yeah.
You know, I have a lot of older ladies that come in here and they're like, so you make a living off of sewing? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how? And I'm like, there's a lot of ways, you know? And so it's like, it's just, you know.
Like I say, there's a lot of ways, and I feel like you're doing all of them.
Yeah.
You're really like working.
Yeah. But I feel like I really, you know, I genuinely do think I'm a workaholic, and I'm proud of that.
Well, you whistle while you work.
You know,
so but
and it is one of those things where it's like, I enjoy it. So it's like, it's kind of hard to basically be like, wait, I get to go, because I get to go teach tonight. So I'm like, wait, I get to go hang out with these ladies that I absolutely love.
Right.
Oh my God. And I'm going to get paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so it's like little things like that you're just kind of like, yeah, this is fun. And, you know, but you also like, I feel like you also set the tone for that.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, we're going to have fun. And then they're like, oh, and I really was like, kind of like scared to go into, you know, ladies that have sewn before or that were older, and them kind of being like, that's not how you do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they're really enjoying this kind of process of like giving themselves grace, allowing them to make mistakes, you know, and just kind of going into it like with like not like these really insane expectations for themselves where they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And so in that way, they're like, I like this. It's like not like so harsh for me. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Do you feel yourself sometimes getting trapped into work mode? And are there like things you do to be like, okay, now take a break? There's things outside of sewing.
Yeah. I feel like for a long time, like, I don't think that I have an identity outside of sewing.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm trying to almost like figure that out, you know, where I'm like, who am I outside of like this sewing world? You know, it's like, I know I'm a mom and like a partner and, you know, but I think I would like to have like more like relationships where I'm like, I would want to go out and have like lunch with my friend.
Well, here's actually what's funny about that is obviously like you're a person who does a lot of sewing related things.
Yeah.
But I also think you're like a genuinely interesting person who sews. Like I've brought friends before like by here and it's like, we'll chit chat forever, Claudia.
Yeah. But it's all about sewing.
It's not all about sewing. And it's also like, it's good conversation too. Cause like, I think you're very capable of just kind of like engaging people.
Yeah.
That's probably what, or part of what makes you a good teacher.
Yeah.
And what kind of invites people into a hobby is it's not just like, it's like, hey, don't you really like sewing? Don't you really want to like this? Yeah. No, it's like, hey, like you're Claudia and you're like, I see you as a person. We are engaging in the craft of sewing right now, but I think you have like both the conversational skills and empathy of like sewing is like, you know, it's how I say like film is like the medium through which to transmit sewing.
Yes.
Like, you know, you are transmitting sewing, but it's through the medium of Claudia. Yes. And Claudia's at least still very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Well, I'm like trying to, I felt like for a long time I was like, well, who, you know, because I also want to, like, how do you get away from something that you
grew up in.
That you love also, where you're like, on my day off, I want to come and sew. Yeah. And then you're like, wait, that's what you did to.
Would you have any inklings of like, well, if not sewing, what are you going to spend your Tuesday doing?
I don't know.
Oh, I have books I want to read. I want to go for a run. I want to.
Like, I like, if it's nice outside, I would be like, oh, I want to clean out the weeds.
Okay.
But then you're like, okay, that's fun for like, you know, it makes it look nice and stuff. And you're like, oh, cool, it looks nice. And then you're like, cool. And then I enjoy coffee shops. My love language is like quality time. So it's like, I'm always like, let's go to a coffee shop together. And so we'll like hang out and like plan like and so it's like, I like that kind of stuff. But I also feel like, you know, it's good that I made it into my life, but I feel like sometimes I'm kind of like, you know, at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Which, because there are so many things that are happening all the time, you kind of have to talk about it, and you just have to be like, okay, we have to do these things so it could keep on going.
Right.
And so, but it is like fun and enjoyable, and you're just kind of like, cool, like, and it's been one of those things where you're like, oh shit, like it fucking, like, I survive off of it.
Yeah.
So then you're just kind of like, wow, this is amazing. And mainly because it's sewing.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, what is happening right here? But I do feel that like a lot of people really want to like learn how to sew, but also there's a lot of people that are interested in like just like in their own artistic like space where they're genuinely always curious about like if social media presence is like important, right? And so that's where I was like, hey, it would be cool to talk to Paul about it, and I feel like you have like a very interesting like angle about it.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is like for a long time it has been sort of like a thing I do outside of work,
Yeah.
So because of that, and because like I haven't like fully invested myself into it, and I'm not trying to say this like, sure, I don't try it all. No, I try so hard. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just been like a fun thing I get to do. And as I've just started thinking about, okay, if I want to really try to pursue this more seriously, I'm very thankful. I've been working hard at it, so I have that audience. But it's also, if I'm going to pay bills, that money's not coming from sewing right now.
Yeah.
So it's figuring out like, yeah, this is something I love to do. This is something I've been figuring out how to do. I'm at the point where maybe I could sort of help use the audience I have to get there.
Yeah.
But it's also like, if you're starting fresh, you're like, oh man, like, do I really need to have like a big social media presence? If you took the time I spend in trying to like craft the perfect video and write a script and then edit everything together, and you took the time into like developing your own skills or connecting with other talented artists and like making some collaborations with other people in the industry, outside of the industry, whatever, like you can just use that time and effort wherever you want.
Yeah.
I've happened to put it into this, and I enjoy it. I put it into this because like I like the making videos and I like sort of the idea of teaching people. But at the end of the day, I don't know if I can say that like it's important, because it's the only kind of sewing I've ever experienced.
I love it.
I haven't given a shot of like, turning Instagram off and then trying to figure out like, oh, where do I go from there? So I can only offer like my perspective as to like where I'm at now. And if someone's starting out, they're like, do I need this audience? Maybe. You could try it. Or if you really don't care about trying it, then like, what do you care about? And how can you use that passion about the thing you care about to become successful, whatever that success might look like for you?
I love that. That's a perfect place to end it.
Okay, all right. I guess we're done.
But before we do,
oh yes, okay.
You have to tell us who you are.
Okay, my name is Paul Chevallier. You may know me online as Toofbush, and if you don't know me at all, then I'm excited to meet you today.
Yeah.
Wow. And thank you, Claudia.
Yeah. No, it was so much fun getting to talk to you about sewing and all kinds of fun stuff. But yeah, thanks for coming, Paul.
Of course, I'm always happy to come by.
Yeah.
Microphones aside.
Yeah. Awesome.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we on the podcast?
Yeah.
Like that. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Wow. We could talk for more.